Hi, my name is Russell Thurston. I'm with Heritage Grove Pecan Farm, and I just want to take a few minutes this morning to show you a little bit about the things taking place here at the farm. We're going to look at bud break, how pollen is formed, and take a really close look at some of the flowers on the pecan tree that you don't often see. Now, this is just a still shot of a Gloria Grand pecan tree here on the farm. It's about a 10-year-old tree. This is a tree called the Mandan variety, and this is during the winter dormant period when it's lost all of its leaves, so there's not a lot going on in that shot. This is another pecan tree that's just showing the buds that are dormant on the branch. In this shot, you can see where the buds are swelling, so we're at late winter, early spring, and the buds are close to opening up, and once they open they'll begin to start their growth period. And you can see on this little branch the buds that are breaking right here. So this is what you're going to look for in the late winter, early spring, when you see the buds begin to push and they will break out of that little protective cover that they're in. And you can see that happening here as a close-up on this shot. You can see the green part of the bud getting ready to open up. Again, this is going to be late winter, early spring. So that's what we're going to focus on here in this first part of the video, is what to look for to be able to tell when things are getting ready to happen. You can see the green part of the leaf in this picture as it's beginning to open up and start its growing period here. You can see this is just a few days after the previous shot, and now we are into full bud break, and the leaves and the new growth will begin to happen fairly quickly here. Again, this is just another shot from a different tree that's showing the same type of action here with the new growth beginning to develop. In this picture, you can see the leaves that have been contained inside the bud. They're getting ready to open, and it will start the process of new shoot growth and shoot development. And again, we're still in the early part of spring. So here are the baby leaves that are beginning to form. I did put some 7 dust or 7 powder because the bugs love to eat the new growth on the new tissue begins to emerge during the growing season. Bugs like to eat that. You can see the shoot development beginning on this shot here, and the growth will occur very quickly. So it goes through these stages fairly rapidly from the time that the buds break and begin to open up until the point where they start really pushing new growth. This is a shot of a pawnee tree, and you can see here that the catkins, which that's where the pollen comes from, they're beginning to develop. And this is later in the growing season. You can see the long, stringy, tassely looking parts of the tree. That's the male part of the tree, and that is the pollen that's needed to pollinate the flower that we'll take a look at here in a minute. So most trees will put out pollen and flowers, but the pollen and the flowers, they're only compatible for a short period of time during the growing season. And this is the actual flower that you see, the dark little part on there. That's a sticky part of the flower, and that's the part that the pollen will attach to. So pecan trees are not pollinated by bees and birds and things like that, but they're wind pollinated. So when the wind blows, the pollen comes off of the male catkin, and any receptive flowers that are close by, they will be pollinated by the pollen. And once that happens, fertilized by the pollen, and when that happens, then that's going to start the growth of the actual pecan, or the nut part. That's what we're trying to accomplish. So again, another picture of the sticky part of the flower, and this part is very, very tiny on the tree. You're not going to see this just by walking past a pecan tree or standing at some distance. If you want to see if the flowers are in bloom, so to speak, you're going to have to get really close to the tree, and you're going to have to look at the branches, the new development of the pecan in order to see if the flowers are beginning to be receptive to the pollen. Again, the very ends of these little flowers are sticky and they're very receptive to the pollen that is blown and carried by the wind. So that's what we're looking at here. It's really hard to get these close-up shots with the camera. Down here in the very center, you can see there's a little cluster of several flowers, and those are going to be receptive to the male pollen. Again, this is just a different angle of the same thing. Those little flower clusters are down in the valley of that new growth development. So here's a shot. You can see where the part of the nut is actually going to begin to form. Once these flowers get pollinated, then that's what kicks off the process of the nut beginning to grow. And you can actually see in this close-up shot where those nuts are beginning to grow, and they typically grow in clusters on a branch. So it's rare that you would just have one nut growing by itself, but you're going to have a cluster of 3 or 4 or 5 different nuts growing in the same cluster at the same time. So these are all flowers that have been pollinated, and you can start to see the early development of the nut, which typically is going to develop with 4 different parts to the nut. And that green part that you see is called the shuck. And that shuck is what's going to protect all of the activities that take place inside of what's going on there. Now this is just a little bit later in the growing season, and that pollen, receptive pollen end where the flower was, that has started to fall off. We don't need that part anymore, and now we're going to start the full development of the flower is going to turn into the nut here, but that takes place over a number of weeks and months during the growing season. And you can see there's a cluster of multiple nuts that are going to take place on this one little branch here. Again, this is just, again, later in the growing season. You can see that the nut is continuing to develop. That little pollen tip on the end is just about gone. This is well into the growing season, and here you can see where the shuck is beginning to split, and once the shuck begins to split, that protective covering, the nuts will come out. This is one that I picked, and just a close-up shot. This is obviously after the harvest time, where we've collected a bunch of nuts. We've shelled some of the nuts here, and you can see how yummy they look. And that's sort of the end of the whole process, is when you get to the part where you can harvest the nuts. And if you're going to sell them in the shell, that's fine, or sell them shelled. That's kind of a quick overview of what happens during the growing season. I want to thank you for watching this video. Our farm is Heritage Grove Pecan Farm. We're located in the southern part of Virginia in Halifax County. Thank you and have a great day.